Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion concerning the Clean Air Preservation Act, a bill that I recently introduced. I'm Senator Doug Mastriano, representing Pennsylvania's 33rd Senate District, which includes all of Adams and Franklin counties. I especially want to acknowledge and thank Jolie Diane, who's joining us from California. Jolie is one of the country's foremost experts on this subject, and we're grateful for her participation today. She will be taking us through a step-by-step PowerPoint presentation covering all aspects of this important issue so that we can become fully educated on it. I, along with everyone here, both in the room and virtually, we hear your concerns. It's one of the top issues that we hear from online and in town halls. It was brought up numerous times this past week when I had my virtual town hall. It's one of the greatest concerns within the district and in the state of Pennsylvania, as well as around the nation. So we hear your concerns and we are responding to them. It is our duty as good stewards of the land to ensure that we leave behind a pristine environment, clean air, safe drinking water, and a reliable food supply for our children and grandchildren. Let me begin by explaining the purpose and key provisions of the Clean Air Preservation Act, also known as Senate Bill 508. This legislation aims to prohibit activities such as solar radiation modification, sunlight reflection methods, cloud seeding, and other polluting atmospheric interventions within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It places enforcement responsibilities on the Pennsylvania State Police and county sheriffs. These law enforcement officials are authorized to issue immediate cease and desist orders if any prohibited activities are suspected. Such orders carry the full weight of a court order, making violations serious offenses. To ensure clarity, the Act carefully defines several key terms. For example, the term cloud seeding refers to the dispersal of chemicals like silver iodide or dry ice into the atmosphere with the intention of influencing precipitation. More broadly, polluting atmospheric intervention encompasses any activities that release pollutants into the atmosphere that could potentially harm public health, the environment, or agriculture. A particular focus of this act is on prohibiting solar radiation modification techniques. These include methods intended to reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth's surface, such as stratospheric aerosol injection or marine cloud brightening. These raise serious concerns due to their possible negative impacts on our ecosystems and health. Regarding enforcement, and this has been an issue with many of the states with similar legislation, ours has teeth. The state police and sheriffs are mandated to act swiftly by issuing cease and desist orders upon suspicion of cloud seeding or polluting atmospheric interventions. If these activities are federally or foreign approved but violate this law in Pennsylvania, over Pennsylvania, the state police or sheriff must notify the relevant federal agencies that such activities cannot lawfully proceed over within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The Air National Guard may also be called upon to assist with technical evaluation and enforcement efforts. Penalties for violations, and here's the teeth. Entities found guilty of engaging in prohibited atmospheric interventions face felony charges with fines starting at $500,000 and/or imprisonment for a minimum of 2 years. Additionally, each day that the violation continues is counted as a separate offense, highlighting the seriousness of ongoing infractions. The law defines entity, and it's important that we define terms, and I continue to do so here. As far as entity, it broadly is used to cover individuals, corporations, municipalities, nonprofits, universities, government departments, including federal agencies, and even artificial intelligence systems. This comprehensive scope ensures accountability for all actors who might engage in these activities. Notably, the inclusion of artificial intelligence and machine learning machines recognizes the growing role of autonomous technologies in atmospheric interventions, ensuring that these emerging technologies are also regulated under the law. While the Act does not prescribe detailed monitoring protocols, it empowers law enforcement agencies to proactively investigate and halt unauthorized activities. The involvement of the Air National Guard provides an additional layer of technical expertise and enforcement capability. In closing, this legislation represents a firm stance against unregulated atmospheric pollution and geoengineering efforts that may jeopardize public health, agriculture, and the environment. It reaffirms Pennsylvania's sovereign right to protect its airspace and natural resources, even in the face of federally or internationally approved programs that could cause harm. Give us a second here. So the legislation is very clear, and our purpose is defined, and it's based around Pennsylvania state law that guarantees that the people have a right to clean air, clean water, and clean land. We're one of the few states with that included in our Constitution, and this Senate Bill 508 is designed to enforce that right that's written in our Constitution that promises the right to clean air, water, and the earth. So with that, we'll hand it over to our guest here in a second. Do we have confirmation? Thank you. With that, I will proceed. So this is nothing new for Pennsylvania. As far as geoengineering, it was popular underneath the administration of John F. Kennedy back in the early 60s, and it was a big deal. Many states have recognized programs out west in the drier states. I think it's at least 9 different states have public programs where they alter the weather through cloud seeding and other methods. Outside of Chambersburg, along the Franklin County and Fulton County borders, there was a group of individuals trying to alter the weather using weather balloons, filling the balloons with silver iodine and other items, and releasing that to the atmosphere. It became so prolific that it caused the legislature in Pennsylvania in 1967 passing a law that regulates that activity. The problem with that law is that it lacks the teeth. So Senate Bill 508 merely adds a bunch of teeth and enforcement possibilities should anyone violate the right to have clean air. We're great. So with that, I want to thank Jolie Diane for joining us today. As already mentioned, she's an expert in this field. She helped us craft this legislation. She's worked with other legislators around the nation to make this possible. She used the lesson learned from the 12 or so other, I don't know how many there are out there. You can help us there, Jolie Diane. But many bills out there. This one is one of the best thanks to your work and your support for us. The United Kingdom has announced a $86 million program. I translated that from pounds to whatever exchange rate is, but they have acknowledged a program to be exercised publicly using public funds, taxpayer dollars, to use the tools of geoengineering to influence the weather. The irony of the UK doing this when they're notorious for bad weather over there already, it kind of defies reason. I don't think you need more rain over there in England, Wales, and Scotland, and Ireland, but God bless you. So there's acknowledged programs, both not just statewide, but also nationwide. Many proponents have alleged, and I agree, it has been happening already before this acknowledgement of this program. They're going to use the lion's share of that $86 million to experiment with these methods that I delineated previously, just moments ago, and then I guess report back to the people. The biggest issue we have here is consent. You know, who is consenting to allow this to happen over our skies, over our heads, over our land? And what are the long-term effects? Is it experimental? And what's the long-term effect on the land, the people, the mammals out there, the wildlife, the fish, our farms, our food supply? So this is one of the greatest concerns that we have. You know, I don't know why it's such a contentious issue. I'm giving all my closing remarks now, so when Jolie Diane is done, we'll just wrap it up. I don't know why it's such a contentious issue. If you don't think it's happening, you know, what's the big deal? Why is there so much vitriol, you know, and anger against a discussion about this here? It makes me wonder why it's such a trigger issue for people who just disagree with it. The fact is, it is happening. As I mentioned, many states out west have acknowledged programs that are doing this here. We have the United Kingdom coming out and publicly acknowledging now programs are already doing, in fact, over their skies. If you remember growing up, at what time did you see condensation trails, which are a normal outcome of a jet in high altitudes, largely the stratosphere, leaving vapor trails behind that expand and grow rather than evaporate? The endurance of contrails depends on the humidity between 30 and 50,000 feet in the stratosphere. But normally you see them evaporating. The jet's flying and you see the trail, the tail, the contrail, condensation trail evaporating behind them. It shrinks. What is happening when you see jets in the stratosphere with exhaust that expands and grows rather than evaporating? That's not a condensation trail, that's something else, and that's what we're here to discuss. So what time in your childhood did you see jets flying overhead? Condensation trails, we saw it in World War II with B-17s over Germany. The condensation trails, contrails, they do evaporate, and the longevity is usually 30 to 90 seconds behind a jet, depending on the humidity at that altitude. And at no time is it a condensation trail if the elements behind the jet expand and grow rather than evaporating. That is an inorganic or organic material included in the exhaust or being ejected out of the aircraft. If you disagree with it, I don't know why it would burn you so much. We have this discussion here. The fact is there's many states around the nation have legislation. Florida is the most recent to pass legislation banning this in the skies over the Sunshine State. It's going to be signed into law hopefully in the next couple days by the governor down there, Ron DeSantis. Tennessee already has it in place, so Florida will be the second one to actually have it signed into law. And there's about a dozen other states that have legislation similar to ours. It's both sponsored by Republicans and Democrats. That's not a partisan issue here. Okay, so I have the numbers. We now have over 30 states with some sort of legislation to address these issues. And they're all at various levels of introduction or movement through the legislatures. Tennessee has their sign into law. Florida is next, which I just mentioned. And our legislation is based on those pieces from the other states. So this bill is so good because it's based off the lessons and applications of the other states that are also working on this issue here. So any online questions? Thank you for that.
We have one question from Valerie on Facebook. She says, what can we do to help get the Clean Air Act, Preservation Act passed?
That's a great question. So right now, the Clean Air Act is sitting in the Agricultural Committee, and so we need to get it through that committee for a vote. So if you're so inclined, you can, of course, reach out to the committee and let them know what your concerns are and why you think that the bill should be passed. I mean, right now, the way legislation works is we write the bill, we put the bill through, and then it goes to a committee, and then once it's in committee, it's up to the chair of the committee to run the bill.
Excellent.
Over to you.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much for the opportunity to present information. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, esteemed colleagues. You hear me okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm so grateful for the introduction of Pennsylvania SB 508. And I appreciate the opportunity to share information in support of this crucial legislation to protect the environment and people. The focus of this presentation is going to be weather modification policy and the governance of geoengineering experimentation, or it's also called research. So the policy on this is crucial because geoengineering governance is a doorway to global governance. Because the infrastructure of geoengineering is global. And so it's fantastic that people around the nation and legislators are getting involved in the weather modification policy discussion. It's absolutely crucial. And we're going to go in some of the paper trail that has led us here, a little bit of the history, some of the laws. This will by no means be comprehensive, but we're going to touch on some of the main points and then hopefully get to discuss some of the questions and some of the aspects of different legislations around the nation, and then what's coming soon. So with that, I'll go ahead and share screen with some of my slides. Okay, so one thing that someone sent over, one of our colleagues from the UK sent this article over yesterday, and it's from 2012, and it's from The Guardian, and the quote here is really important. Few in the civil sector fully understand that geoengineering is primarily a military science, has nothing to do with either cooling the planet or lowering carbon emissions. And that was a quote from Matt Anderson, a former executive advisor, Aerospace and Defense, Booz Allen Hamilton, Chicago. So this is really important. It's been going on a long time. People have been talking about it, but we haven't been involved in the policy of this activity, and mostly military driven. You did touch on some of the definitions. So the definition of geoengineering, the intentional large-scale alteration or manipulation of the environment, weather modification, any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition and behavior dynamics of the atmosphere, solar radiation modification to block the sunlight using aerosol. SRM includes the use of interoperable ground-based, airborne, and space-based facilities. And you went through the definition of cloud seeding, which it doesn't necessarily involve changing the weather or trying to change the weather. Sometimes they're just doing weather experiments just to see how pollutants will travel through the atmosphere. So here's where we're having our center of gravity. This is an article from May 2015 talking about human intervention in the Earth's climate, the governance of geoengineering in 2025. So this was already being discussed, and the only people that were in the discussion were our legislators, our elected legislators. Other than that, it's mostly being discussed in academic circles and public-private partners and at the UN. So in 1961, JFK was talking about efforts to control the weather. So here's his quote: "We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. We will propose finally a global system of communications, satellites linking the whole world in telegraph and telephone and radio and television." So this is 1961. And here's where we are now. It's the same quote here. We have the World Meteorological Organization from the UN, the hub of weather modification activities on the Earth, and this would include weather monitoring, which is also called observation. And then we have the ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union. That's also the UN. And that is all global wireless standards. And that also includes on the Earth and in space, so satellites as well. So these agencies are the fulfillment and organizing of JFK's vision back in 1961. The WMO and the ITU are actually partners in this, and here's from their website how they work together to coordinate weather services and other aspects of weather. So these two agencies are a team and they're working together. And I do want to just go over here to the history, keep going with the history. So the quote was from JFK in 1961. Just backing up a little bit, this is a declassified memo, and it was written to the General Charles P. Cabell, and this was talking about efforts, federal efforts for climate control. So this is part of the document talking about the technological basis for the reexamination of the feasibility of climate control. Talking about the developments occurring for the last 2 decades. So that would take us back to the 1940s or so. Talking about the understanding, techniques, means necessary for an assault on the problems of climate control. So the effort was to control the weather, control the climate, and they say control of any kind requires capabilities in all 3 of these areas. Meteorology is just now beginning to acquire such capabilities. So that's the umbrella that we are operating under in the architecture over history to control the climate and control the weather. Here's a document reflecting on 50 years of geoengineering research written by Ken Caldera in 2016. He mentions President Johnson's administration suggesting geoengineering activities, and this paper was written in 2017. And one of the documents from the paper trail that was mentioned in that document of 50 years of geoengineering is this document from 1965 from the Johnson administration. They're talking about weather modification possibilities. And then there's a really important agreement that happened between the United States, NASA, and the Soviet Union, which is their Soviet Academy of Sciences. Back in 1971, there was an agreement and that they would work together and do experiments. And they did that. And we are operating now within the framework that was created way back then. And they're talking about the framework with the United Nations WMO. Here's 1974, more of the paper trail, talking about the need for a national weather modification research program. And they talk about some of the kinds of research or experiments as part of the meteorology area: precipitation modification, fog and cloud modification, hail suppression, lightning modification, hurricane and severe storm modification, inadvertent modification. So all very much involved in weather and climate control. There's another page from this. Very important to see the agencies involved here so we can get an understanding of the organizing principles. So we have the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, NOAA, Department of Commerce, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Department of Defense, DOD, Department of Reclamation, Department of Interior, NSF, FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Transportation. So we'll see later in the presentation how these agencies are still involved in weather experimentation. And it goes through some of the laws here. Of course, I'm going to provide you with these slides and the sources so that people will be able to go and do a dive. So that was 1974. This is a paper, it's a report actually published by DARPA in 1975. Soviet developments in weather modification, climate modification, and climatology. And they talk about, this is a very important quote here, a method of moderating planetary warming trends by temporarily increasing the concentration of sulfate aerosol particles in the lower stratosphere and thereby reducing incoming solar radiation. So this is what we're talking about now, right? This is the proposal that we're hearing, and that is very much why we're here today. We can't allow these kinds of programs to occur because this is going to increase pollution and be harmful. So I'm going to go over some of the policies now. And again, you'll be able to go through this. Again, it's not comprehensive. We're just touching on some of the architecture for the current policy. So we have the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972 and Weather Modification Policy Act, and then coming all the way through to the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act of 2017, which is what we are under. So I'm going to jump over to a very important document related to federal policy. This is the Office of Science and Technology policy document from 2023. This was published by the White House in 2023. This is talking about a congressionally mandated research plan or experimentation plan and an initial research governance framework. So here's the important part related to solar radiation modification. And so we're not trying to prove that there is something called solar radiation modification. We're really trying to get in there to hammer in on the governance. So I'll go through a few key points on this document just to get some of the basic idea and why it's important. Hopefully everybody has seen this. If not, it would be a very good thing to download this and got your highlighter. So the scientific dimensions of solar radiation modification include new and continued ground-based, airborne, and space-based observations or facilities. And so I'd like to just give you a photo of this so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about here in terms of the anatomy, if you will, of weather experimentation. So we have ground-based. So this would be radar, communication systems, instruments. It's all part of one Internet of Everything. We have airborne. So most people that have been studying weather modification activities are familiar with the aerosol piece. And then we have space-based. So that would be our satellite system. And of course, what we're interested in this interoperable system is what's the environmental impact? How much pollution are we getting? What is going to be the response of biology and so forth? What's going to be the harm to come? And so we're looking at cloud seeding aerosols or geoengineering aerosols. And we're also looking at pulse modulated radio frequency microwave radiation. And we're contextualizing this in terms of pollution. How much pollution are we getting? So back over to the Office of Science and Technology policy document. We're going to talk about on page 6 of some of the experiments, outdoor experiments, and the testing of aerosol injection technologies. So this is what the focus is for SRM. And so this is, again, what we want to prohibit. Page 15 of this document, we go into some of what they call the known unknowns of these experiments. So some of the known unknowns would be more frequent extreme drought or precipitation events, which again, this started, this was beginning the funding for this particular project back in 2022. So just to keep in mind, and this is a CNBC article just documenting that from October 18th, 2022. So that's when this was proposed. So the Office of Science and Technology Policy, that was the document we're looking at, coordinating a 5-year research program, including stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, cirrus cloud thinning. Stratospheric aerosol injection involves spraying an aerosol like sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. That would end our blue skies. And so they also say some of the techniques, such as spraying sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, are known to have harmful effects on the environment and human health. I'll stop. So over here on the Office of Science and Technology policy document, page 22, they're talking about instrumented aircraft platforms and aerosol precursor injection systems needed in both as SAI and MCB. So SAI, again, is stratospheric aerosol injection. MCB is marine cloud brightening. In both instances, it involves the release of materials into the atmosphere, which are going to change the chemistry, the composition, the dynamics, and the behavior of the atmosphere and cause harmful pollution. They also say of interest for SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection, of interest is how aerosols are formed and evolved in the real stratosphere. The response of the injection to the injection of aerosols, aerosol precursor gases, sulfur dioxide. They say a variety of aerosol materials could be examined. So again, this is an experimentation that's being undertaken and conducted with consent. One basic principle of research ethics is informed consent and the willing participation of people in the experiment. And of course, no one gave their consent for this. And that's another reason why it's so vital to prohibit these activities because we can't have clean air and have SAI. The last piece here, detecting the radiative signature of the enhanced aerosol population is fundamental to understanding SAI. So going back to our diagram here, detecting the radiative signature of the enhanced aerosol population is fundamental to understanding SAI. So they're using these infrastructures and this apparatus and down here as an observational tool, okay? We're interested in how much radiation we're getting because that is a hazardous physical agent. And it's not being monitored and it's not being measured. So again, we want to address the infrastructure of weather modification in its entirety. Back over here to the White House, the Office of Science and Technology document is going to close this out a little bit. Page 43 of the Office of Science and Technology policy document. Coordination of federally funded research into solar radiation modification. The federal government conducts or funds limited research into SRM. Congress has directed NOAA to fund SRM research as part of its Earth's radiation budget program for the last several years. So the federal research program into SRM coordinated by the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And this was enacted and mandated by the Global Change Research Act of 1990. And so if we go to the website, the U.S. Global Change Research Program website, here are some of the agencies that are involved, and you will recognize them from the 1974 document that we looked at before. We have Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture is involved and has been involved in cloud seeding experimentation. They did oppose our clean air bill in South Dakota last year. We have NOAA here, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, and of course DARPA would be in there. And then we have Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, Energy, Housing, Interior, State. Remember that State, Department of State, is very much connected with the UN. So we don't have oversight and we don't know what kind of activities and connections and affiliations are going on. We need to review that. A Department of Transportation, FAA, is here. EPA. So again, there's been some instances where EPA has opposed our clean air bill in some of the legislations, and the reason is because they may have a conflict of interest due to their partnership in the U.S. Global Change Research Program. NASA is also involved, and again had signed that memorandum and partnership with the Soviets in 1971. National Science Foundation is a huge funder of these kinds of programs. And then we have Smithsonian and USAID. And there is going to be some shifting of monies at the federal level. We've seen that, but I imagine that it's just going to be like a shell game going to some other agency. Again, that's why the opportunity and the at the state level is very important to use that 9th Amendment, that 10th Amendment. One of the programs that they have here mentioned in the Office of Science and Technology policy document is something called SABRE. So we'll go over to that website. For SABRE, this is the NOAA Chemical Sciences Laboratory, SABRE. Here's the operational range. Here's one of the aircraft that's used, talking about stratospheric aerosol loading. And you'll be able to go and look through some of the, this is probably not going to let me jump over there. Okay, so just closing out this. So if we go to the footnote here with the U.S. Global Change Research Program, they have a strategic plan through 2031. So again, when you go to download this document, you can go and check out the strategic plan. Okay, so let's go back over here to our PowerPoint. Okay, so we had the United Nations working together, the UN ITU and the UNWMO. This is the apparatus for weather experimentation, involves ground-based, airborne, space-based facilities. It's an interoperable system. Part of that system is being installed all around us on the ground in communications infrastructure. And the general assumption is that is only for communications, but that's not true. This is a very sophisticated surveillance system. And so there are capabilities for interoperability between satellites, drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. So it's not only about communications. And this is important because we want to know what are the purposes of these facilities. Is it only for communications, or is it for weather monitoring? And also we know that this is harvesting data from us through our devices, which many people don't realize. It's a tracking system. It's an Internet of Things, Internet of Bodies. So again, we want to look very carefully at this infrastructure that is right now standardized at the UN. So we look to, there's a lot of talk about the FCC, but the thing is we have to realize that the FCC and these other agencies are following the UN ITU. Here they are from the website there, from the ITU website. And that China is one of the top contributors there that's contributing to the making of ITU global standards. So we're not monitoring, we're not measuring, and at any time our grid can be disabled according to declassified material. Our internets, our communication system can just be taken out. And so this is something that we want to look closer at and look at how much what is the pollution impact of this, okay? And then we need to start reducing the pollution. Fiber to the premises is really the way to go to protect our system, because we're talking about not only our communication system, but we're also talking about our system of commerce and being able to do financial transactions. Okay, so we have something called the Global Climate Observing System. So again, this is just trying to illustrate the architecture of this system. So this is the GCOS, the Global Climate Observing System, which is, again, connected to this. It's all one connected grid, and it's also called the control grid by some, and it has all the affiliations with the UN. We are in a region there, and you can see here WMO weather radars. We're just covered in these weather radars, and no one's monitoring, no one's checking to see what is that footprint, how much radiation are we getting. Here's another report with some of these facilities in the U.S. Here are some of the affiliations, very important. Who are the affiliates of the Global Climate Observing System? And we have affiliates from all over. We have Russia in there, we have China in there, Japan, Norway, all of these agencies, and we don't have any oversight or knowledge of what's going on, so that needs to change. Okay, so we do not consent. That's what's going on. So we're going to talk now about the state policies. First, we're going to get into the current weather modification policy. Okay, so we have federal policy, and we have 29 states plus Washington, D.C., that has some kind of weather modification, and this is pro-weather modification. So these policies indicate that, yes, we're fine with weather modification. You know, they have some kind of regulation around it, but it's to enable this. Now, I do want to point out that Florida is one of the 2 states so far that has banned these programs, and they did repeal their weather modification policy. So that's really important. When we go at the state level, we want to repeal these plans here, because many of them have been around since the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. We also do have policy in Pennsylvania, which we would want to repeal. So this is from the North Dakota Law Review article, and you'll again be able to go and check that out. Here is the Pennsylvania policy. And so it's kind of in the governor's abilities for emergencies. And it is important to note that weather modification is unproven. It doesn't work. And we have the actual science backs that up. It's a big business, but this is from 2010. And it's talking about how cloud seeding not effective at producing rain as once thought, new research shows. We also wouldn't want to try to use weather modification for drought, because you need moisture in the air to create rain. And what happens generally is that I try to make rain for me where I am, and then I have to steal rain from someone else. You can't it doesn't just happen out of nowhere. You have to harvest that rain. And so that's why water is a really big deal. Control of water, rather. Okay, and so we do not consent. So here are the legislations, and we've been supporting grassroots and efforts of state legislators to help push forward legislation to ban weather modification, geoengineering, cloud seeding activities. So 2 of the states have passed legislation. We have 33 states so far that have pushed something forward in the last couple years. And this is not comprehensive. There's other bills that are not on here. We just wanted to get the states on here. I also want to mention that SB 46 from Louisiana has passed through the House, and it's back over to the Senate. It passed through the Senate first. It passed through the House with amendments, and then it's back over to the Senate, so we're waiting for concurrence there. But just to show that there are measures being pushed, and states are getting involved in this conversation, which is fantastic. Because no one's going to care about your environment like you do. And in Pennsylvania especially, like the senator was saying, we are especially fortunate in Pennsylvania where the Constitution instructs that the people have a right to clean air, clean, pure water, and the preservation of the natural environment. So this is absolutely crucial that we follow this, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. And of course, solar radiation modification would destroy air quality, water quality, and also the land, the soil. So can't have weather modification and solar radiation modification and clean air. Okay, so I want to just go back into the overall context here of the organizing principle on the Earth for weather intervention and weather control and weather experimentation. This is Agenda 21, signed in 1992 under Bush Sr. This is buried on page 315 of the Agenda 21 document. Support national, sub-regional, regional, and international observation and research programs in global atmospheric chemistry. And it's unlikely that many people are even aware of this, but this is the center of gravity for all of the nations working together as stated by JFK in 1961. And observation is a key part of this. And that is through the use of satellites and ground-based infrastructure to observe or monitor or surveil the weather and other things. Okay, so here's the Federal Weather Enterprise that was codified in 2017 with the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act of 2017. You can see here, exercise leadership in coordinating U.S. efforts in international weather research priorities, including the current World Meteorological Organization grand challenges. So there's a big budget in here too that people will probably be interested in, and it shows 30-odd agencies that are getting funded at that time. Then here is the document we were looking at, Congressionally Mandated Research Plan, Initial Research Governance Framework from the Office of Science and Technology. And they also say that the form of cooperation would involve the World Meteorological Organization World Climate Research Program. And we can check out what that looks like here. This is the World Climate Research Program from the UN. Global Precipitation Experiment. So this is happening outside the context of our Constitution and outside the framework where our elected members have oversight. So again, the UN has their own Congress for the WMO. They have their own ideas that they follow. This is the World Weather Research, so they have their own plan here, 2024 to 2027, World Weather Research Implementation Plan. I do want to point out that the United States, unfortunately, did sign the United Nations Pact for the Future in September 2024, transforming global governance. So a lot of this has to do with the technology, and this is the advanced digital transformation. We have to be aware that these facilities are harvesting data and tracking and moving to an AI system. And so this does recognize the International Telecommunications Union as the center of gravity there, advancing digital cooperation. And they talk about support the development, deployment, and sustainable use of emerging and open source technologies, and support policies toward open science and open innovation to achieve the sustainable development goals. So a transformation in global governance is essential. That's what they're saying. And so that's, a full stop. In the U.S., we have our own constitution. We have our own system. We certainly don't want global governance, and we don't want interference in our states with these kinds of systems that would be 24/7, 365 surveillance, not just surveillance of our bodies, but also there have been legislations introduced to protect our neuro rights, because there's technology that's being deployed that can read our minds, that can influence our thoughts, that can influence behaviors. You can look into the work of Dr. James Giordano to learn more about neuro weapons. Okay, so it's notable that Mexico banned solar geoengineering experimentation in 2023. So right now I want to get into the global governance aspect. And so this is very good. This is, we should all be banning geoengineering, and hopefully we will. But who else is talking about global governance? We have the German Environment Agency talking about the governance of solar radiation modification research. And on the one hand, they say, well, this should be banned. It's a terrible thing. And then on the other hand, but we should have a way to govern research. Okay, so that's been the storyline all along. And of course, there is no justifiable distinction between research and actual use of these kinds of applications and technologies. So you can't do an open air experiment without introducing pollutants. Here's France on the same thing, solar radiation modification, governance of research. This is 2023. Here's Pakistan, solar radiation modification, governance of geoengineering research. That's 2024. Here's the EU, solar radiation modification, governance of geoengineering research. Here's 2018, the Vatican, seminar on the governance of geoengineering. So you can see all these big players in here. And we have to have our state members involved in the governance. So it's all about the governance. Let's see here. So how are we doing on time? I can wrap up a couple minutes here.
You're good to go. Please proceed. We have a lot of live viewers on social media, like over 1,000 on X alone, which is outstanding. So you have the nation's attention. So back over to you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So this is a really great article from 2024. It was published by the Environmental Law Review at Georgetown University. And these authors ask some really important questions. Why is climate modification unregulated? They say climate modification is not a conspiracy theory or a hypothetical. It is happening, and it is changing weather patterns. Yet, climate modification is almost wholly unregulated. So, again, underscoring the great timing that we have right now, an opportunity to address the lack of regulation. And we know that sulfur dioxide was one of the agents that was suggested in the Office of Science and Technology policy document. And we know that this is very harmful. So we would never want to do this. So again, Pennsylvania Constitution, you must protect people's clean air, clean water. Another thing that happened recently related to sulfur dioxide specifically is the EPA issued a notice to the group Making Sunsets. And they talk about the harm of sulfur dioxide. So this is one geoengineering startup. There are many others. For example, there's an Israeli-U.S. startup working on aerosol technology. Again, so this is a huge business, and if we don't have regulations in place, and we have regulations that imply consent for weather modification, that's what we need to address, because these folks are just going to say, hey, we're helping you. Okay, so also did want to show, we have here's the World Economic Forum. I forgot this one, but this is another one that people will recognize. The World Economic Forum thinks that there should be, intervention research, and, they have their own ideas about the governance of that. We don't want any interference from those folks either, obviously. Just to show you where this is going, the UN ITU also has a strategic plan for 2024 to 2027. Again, setting the global standards. We've heard a lot about AI. AI is a big part and built the communications infrastructure. We must have control over the infrastructures in our many states, and these infrastructures must be under our own constitutions and subject to our jurisdiction, our laws, because otherwise we're operating under the UN ITU, and that's not protective of the health and safety and environment of people and all life. Okay, so let's see here. All right. So in Pennsylvania, we know that some of this infrastructure is being, and everywhere around the nation and world, this infrastructure is being deployed. I want to bring your attention to the peer review report on global precipitation enhancement activities. Again, so these folks are just doing their own thing, but they are operating a global precipitation enhancement program. And here is one of the quotes from this document. Says that they're using an emerging technique to monitor the spatial and temporal variability of precipitation. So monitoring precipitation through measurement of the attenuation of microwave radiation associated with commercial cellular telephone networks. So they're using these cell towers, and this diminishment of the signal from A to B is what is being measured here. And of course, we want to know, well, how much radiation is that? It's not just going from A to B. It's a huge field going everywhere. We need to monitor, we need to measure that, but this is what's happening. So they're using these facilities to monitor precipitation and monitor us. And so just want to show a couple of documents related to that. This is Advanced Science News, microwave links from cellular communication networks as rain gauges. We have the physics.org, researchers use attenuation between cell towers to measure rainfall. Okay, so that's all part of the program there. I also want to point out that in addition to the cellular communications infrastructure, the weather radar, we also have the NEXRAD systems. And so the NEXRAD is next generation radar. And so this is a map of the NEXRADs around the United States. And this is an older map, so there are likely more NEXRADs. But there's also legislation coming down the pike, so this is what's coming. This has been introduced, HR 1115, the Weather Radar Coverage Improvement Act, and they want to fill gaps in the NEXRADs. Well, there aren't very many gaps there. And what we can see is that here's the National Weather Service map. Okay, so they're showing us the NEXRADs here. And again, we want to know how much radiation are we getting. So one of our colleagues did a reading over here at a Massachusetts NEXRAD back in June. And I'll just go to the peak reading here. So the peak reading from this NEXRAD is 841,030 microwatts per square meter. And to put this in context, anything over 1,000 is considered to be an extreme hazard, according to building biology. And this is not for cell phone service, right? This is not for communications. So we have the problem of cell phones and weather monitoring are being regulated as if they are just one thing, and they are not one thing. And so this is something to look at very carefully and separate, because this is a whole lot of radiation, and all we need for a cell phone call is 0.002 microwatts per square meter. That's minus 85 decibel milliwatts. Okay, and so This is something that's very important because here's a live map from College of DuPage. And this is showing the phased array system, or these NEXRADs, all across the nation. And you can see they're moving and there's flashing, so the transmission of microwave radiation. This is part of the weather experimentation, weather observation. Again, we want to know what's the impact, how much radiation, how much microwave radiation are we getting here? And we can't just measure it for 1 second. We have the measurement that we got here, but this is just one moment in time. To get the right idea of how much radiation is there, we would need to add this up every minute of every day of every week of every year. And then we'd have a better idea of how much microwave radiation we're getting. We will send you this is a peer review study of a NEXRAD from North Carolina in 2017, where the authors or researchers found very high levels of microwave radiation around this NEXRAD facility, and they talk about how the radiation bounces off of things and is directed back into the environment. And then, so why is this important? Well, let's think about fire hazard for a moment. Not only the accumulation of aerosol materials, but then we also have the constant transmission and exposure and contamination of microwave radiation. And so this is going to contribute to dry conditions. And this is important because the next round of research that the federal government is going to be engaged in is fire weather research. And so, let's see, we have a Big Beautiful Act. Here's Fix Our Forests Act. So this is S1462, the Fix Our Forests Act. This is one of dozens of federal bills that have been introduced regarding forest management. And in the article by the Georgetown University article that we looked at a few moments ago, one of the quotes they have that was very interesting from that article is, Congress began fixing wildfire in 2013. Since then, the incidence of wildfire has dramatically increased. What if our new approach to wildfire is causing the crisis? Indeed, the sharp uptick in disastrous wildfires correlates with increasing federal control and an increased reliance on data-driven fire modeling. So in S1462, some of the things that are problematic in here are they want to get rid of NEPA. They want to toss and dismiss NEPA. So they say the designation of a fireshed management area under this section shall not be subject to the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, that's NEPA, of 1969. So why would you do that? If you're interested in protecting and preserving the environment, why would you remove your safeguards? And so that doesn't make any sense right there. And then they're also using 5G in this. And I don't usually talk about 5G because 5G, 6G, that's just an advertising term to make radiation sound good. But actually it's radiation, and they're deploying these networks, and we're not monitoring, we're not measuring, and this is part of a massive communications and surveillance network that's, again, global. So we want to look at that. We also want to look at the Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is coming. 5G, 6G, AI is funded in one Big Beautiful Bill Act. Now, real problem with this for our 10th Amendment is buried in that act. That's 1,118 pages, by the way, if anyone wants to do some light reading. And it may have been reduced because I know they have updated the bill, but at any rate, what they say here is no state or political subdivision may enforce any law or regulation regulating artificial intelligence models, artificial intelligence systems, or automated decision systems during the 10-year period beginning on the date of the enactment of this act. So this is absolutely unacceptable.
If I could jump
first
in
of all-
here, Jolie, so we'll need to wrap it up here in a second, but I'd like to comment on that. One of my colleagues has a
Great.
letter going out to the caucus asking all of us to sign it to go to our senators to appeal to them to get that out, because that's unsatisfactory. The state should and must be able to monitor and regulate AI and not have that for a whole decade pulled away from us. But any final thoughts before I fire a couple questions at you?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, and I want to for hosting this very important roundtable and the opportunity to share information. And I want to thank everybody, online listening, and all of the people that have been working so hard to try to address this urgent matter and have been advocating. All the legislators who have been advocating and trying to ban these activities. And I want to just thank you and Senator Bartolotta for introducing SB 508 and championing the PA Constitution and the protection of people and nature. So, yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for helping us with this legislation. Thank you for helping other states as well. Thank you for guiding us through the process. I think the first question that strikes me is, for those that aren't convinced, why is there such a vitriolic reaction to a discussion on this topic? I read comments online, and I'd say about a third of the viewers at any given time are violently opposed to even a discussion about this. You've worked this longer than any of us have. Why is there so much vitriol on the other side?
That's a great question. I think one, it's kind of a hard reality to accept, and so I think there are a number of things that there are people that have been studying this and working on this much longer than I have, but I think that there's different ways to deal with that. This very difficult reality, and also the federal government has been engaged in this for so long, and people are not necessarily familiar with the topic. So sometimes just ad hominem attacks can just stop the discussion, and then you don't have to go into it. So that's why I tried to just stay centered on the paper trail of the policy and other people that are talking about the policy. And I think that there's no question that these things are going on. If you just follow, you can go into a lot more detail than we did today of the actual programs and budget. So yeah, I don't know why that is.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, your presentation was extremely compelling. You've brought the receipts, you have the evidence. We're in Missouri mode, right? Show me. And you showed us, you showed the viewers out there. It is happening. It has been happening. What we see with our own eyes on almost a daily basis, it seems like. It's not normal. It's not right in the skies above us. I'd ask folks out there, ask hard questions, but be intellectually curious. Ask the questions. Check your suppositions. It is so real, and you listed, I had it wrong. I had 30 states, but 33 states that you had on that list are moving, and the 3 are headed in the right direction. 2 sign a law, 1 Louisiana imminently. Something real is happening. It's time for Pennsylvania to take the lead. We are the seat of the nation. This is where our republic was birthed. Everything happened here. And it's time that Pennsylvania take its rightful place as a leader in the nation and move this legislation. So as you listed, there's many states out there with legislation in various levels of introduction and movement in legislatures. What did you learn by working with all these states?
Just how many great people are involved in this and wanted to take legislative action. And I want to go through some of those bills if I could. And I want to really emphasize that there is precedent to do this. And as you said, Pennsylvania really does need to lead, because this is what we have up on the screen now is the 1967 law that you had in place there, which was essentially a licensing system where people could fill out an application and in theory. And the thing is that there was these guardrails, and and this language is just extremely important. Government and armed forces projects within the province of this statute must meet all the requirements of this act. So here we are flexing the 10th Amendment, and this is extremely important because many people have been saying, well, you can't do anything at the state level. You know, that's impossible. Well, it's been done before. It was done in Pennsylvania, and they used for enforcement the Pennsylvania State Police. So we've already done it. So that's not even a topic for discussion. Another state that has precedent, but not quite as strong with enforcement, but it's a thing. Here's 1965 Maryland, cloud seeding to prohibit persons in the state from engaging in weather modification by means of cloud seeding or otherwise, to prohibit the use of ground generators for weather modification. Okay, so, it's already been done. That's our center of gravity for our precedent. This discussion that we're having allows us to do what we need to do with the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment, that we can bring states' rights to the discussion and challenge these, the current federal law. The current federal policy is this, the 9A is one of them. Also the HR 353, the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act. So that includes the communications and radars we looked at. Also, the way they word this, atmospheric research to be tested in operational simulations, such as test beds. Okay, so at the state level, I know everyone is, here we have, come on. Okay, here's very important, Tennessee, which was the first state, as most people know, to ban geoengineering. Very, very important start here. And so I just want to point out some of the things that we've learned from this legislation. One was we need to have a different enforcement because the TDEC was not able to enforce the law. So the sponsors are going back, and they're hopefully going to put in a different kind of enforcement or update that because they had problems with that. And also the language here, and this is really important because a lot of states copied this language, and there's a little bit of a hole here that makes a whole lot of things possible that we wouldn't want. So it says, the intentional injection, release, or dispersion by any means of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus within the borders of the state into the atmosphere with the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of sunlight. This is not a good phrase. It should be for purposes including, okay, there's other ways that you could state this, but the reason that this is a problem is that, for example, we have, this is an article from NASA, about NASA, and it was from a few months ago. Why is NASA creating clouds in the sky over many countries around the world? And they, it's not a sinister plot. It's just a scientific experiment. Okay, and so in this article, they say they're not doing weather modification. They're not doing geoengineering. They're not trying to change the weather. They're not doing anything. It's like that. These cloud seeding experiments, they say, are just to study movements in the upper atmosphere. Okay, so, and they say they're using trimethyl aluminum. But don't worry, it's fine, they say. It's totally harmless. Well, if you go check that, because trust but verify, we go over to PubChem and trimethyl aluminum, flammable, corrosive, very harmful. So, no. So this is one of the problems in the Tennessee bill, which we would like to see other states, if they do follow this, to remove this phrase, because we don't want any kind of atmospheric experimentation or intervention. And that's what we did in Pennsylvania. We have where it's, highlight this, prohibiting solar radiation modification, sunlight reflection methods, cloud seeding, and polluting atmospheric interventions. So that would cover everything. And that's super important because we don't want to leave any holes there. And also, as you mentioned, with the enforcement, very important. We don't want to have to use the National Guard, but we do have to protect our airspace, so it's necessary. So we have other states. Rhode Island has been carrying the ball for many years, and we're very grateful to the legislators there and to our colleagues there that have been working so diligently. In their bill, one of the most comprehensive bills, they also have sunlight reflection methods. They also include the PFAS. So I know parafluoroalkyl or polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. People are familiar with this as from forever chemicals. And this is important because sometimes chaff is used for weather experimentation, weather research, and so we found out that these kinds of activities with chaff, we know that chaff contains PFAS. So some of the bills include that. And, you know, again, we want to protect our environment. So we want to make sure that we prevent the release of chaff as well. So this is a Vermont bill that's similar to Rhode Island. Very comprehensive and includes all of the infrastructure connected to the radio frequency radiation grid. Here's PA 508, Rhode Island. This is the Florida bill. So again, the Florida bill includes the same language that we had with the Tennessee bill. And it's headed in the right direction, and this is supposed to take effect in July, and we hope that they are very successful, and they may want to consider amending to, again, close this gap where it says for the express purpose of affecting the temperature. And we have Louisiana. We have Louisiana 608. The Louisiana Atmospheric Protection Act. So this one is also moving through the House. It's gone through a couple committees already, so we're very grateful. This is a bill that is similar to Rhode Island and Vermont, very comprehensive. And then SB 46 in Louisiana is a little bit different, more along the lines of the Tennessee approach, and they also did add their National Guard there for surveillance capabilities in SB 46. So both of those also have the Air National Guard capabilities in there. Okay, so Oklahoma was a really good bill with in terms of their procedure, I thought, for the Air National Guard. This did not make it through this year, so the members will probably be coming back next year and really appreciate their efforts. But I wanted to share this. The governor may direct the Oklahoma Air National Guard to interdict, document identification tail numbers, secure photographic evidence, sample aerosolized effluents or particulate, utilize mass spectrometers or other appropriate scientific instrumentation, and engage with aircraft violating this section to escort them to the nearest airport for investigation, securing of evidence, and documentation of violations. So I thought this is something that's, you know, very well done. And when people are asking, how are you going to do this? Well, this would be one way that you could do it.
Thank you. So we're going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you, Jolie Diane, for your hard work. I think the closing statement here is from one of our viewers on X, and Julie says, I could choose the food I eat, not the air I breathe. And that's the bottom line. We haven't consented to anything. This should not be happening in our skies over our country without our consent, without acknowledgement. I understand the challenge, of course, is maybe some of these programs are classified. A lot of the federal programs might be under the black budget. We're trying to figure out, you know, which federal agency oversees this. We're looking at NOAA. We have a right to know to NOAA, but we haven't heard anything yet on that. They'll probably be redacted when they respond to us anyway.
Yeah, and you would look into the U.S. Global Change Research Program of which the DOD is among these agencies, these 15 agencies. And so, yeah, I mean, there are things for national security, but this is the reason why the states need to be involved. We need to know exactly what's going on in our airspace, and we need to be able to protect our environment and our people.
I agree. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your help with not just our legislation here in Pennsylvania, but across the nation. Thank you for being a voice on a very important topic of our time. So as a conclusion here, Senate Bill 508 is currently in the Agricultural Committee, and we hope we get that moved out of committee and for a floor vote. We'll be working towards that end. But in the meantime, we'll keep you posted, and we appreciate all that you've done for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And that concludes our roundtable. Thanks for joining us. So many viewers online. I appreciate it. You're going to see the formal video put up on X as well and IG later on today. Thank you, guys. God bless.